She walked into her own company, dressed in power and confidence. But before she could even sit down, an employee looked at her and said, "Hey, make me a coffee." What he didn't know was that the woman he was disrespecting wasn't an assistant. She was the new CEO. And within minutes, his entire world would turn upside down. It was a bright Monday morning when she walked through the tall glass doors of the company headquarters. The lobby smelled faintly of fresh polish and coffee, and every step she took echoed with quiet confidence. She had worked her entire life for this moment, her first official day as CEO of one of the most powerful corporations in the country. Dressed in an elegant navy suit, with her hair neatly pulled back, she looked every bit the leader she was. But in the eyes of some, appearances told a different story. As she made her way toward the elevators, she passed the break room where a small group of employees were gathered. A man in a crisp gray suit, older and full of self-importance, looked up at her. Without even asking who she was, he waved his hand dismissively and said, "Hey, new girl. Be useful, get me a coffee, black, 2 sugars. And hurry up, I don't have all day." His tone was sharp, filled with the kind of arrogance that assumes others exist to serve. The room grew tense. A few people shifted in their seats, some glanced at the floor, and one young woman bit her lip, as if embarrassed by what had just happened. But nobody said a word. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of the coffee machine in the corner. The new CEO paused, her face calm and unreadable. She gave the man a polite nod, as if his words hadn't stung, and continued walking. Inside, though, she felt a storm rising. This wasn't the first time someone had mistaken her value. But it might be the last time anyone inside this building did. The conference room buzzed with anticipation. Executives shuffled papers, assistants hurried to adjust screens, and conversations about quarterly profits filled the air. At the center of it all sat the man in the gray suit, relaxed and confident, tapping his pen against the polished wooden table. He glanced at the door impatiently, muttering under his breath about how long it was taking for his coffee order to arrive. A few colleagues smirked, but most avoided his eyes, uncomfortable with his arrogance. Then, the double doors swung open. The room fell silent. Walking in with steady steps was the same woman he had mocked only minutes earlier. But this time she wasn't just a passerby in the hallway, she was the leader everyone had been waiting for. Dressed with authority, carrying a folder filled with plans for the company's future, she walked straight to the head of the table. Without hesitation, she placed her materials down, looked across the room, and said with calm strength, "Good morning. Let's begin." Mouths dropped. The man in the gray suit froze, his smirk wiped away in an instant. His pen stopped tapping. Realization hit him like a wave. This wasn't an assistant. This wasn't a newcomer. This was the CEO. The woman he had just ordered to fetch him coffee was now his boss, and she commanded the room with a presence that left no space for doubt. She didn't glance his way, nor did she mention the insult. Instead, she began outlining her vision for the company: growth, innovation, and a culture of respect. Every word carried weight. The employees leaned in, inspired, while the arrogant man sank lower into his chair, his earlier confidence replaced with quiet regret. The room was so quiet you could hear the faint buzz of the projector. Every eye was on her as she spoke, her voice steady yet commanding. She didn't need to raise her tone, her presence alone demanded attention. "Before we talk about profits and numbers," she began, "we need to talk about people. This company is not built on spreadsheets or stock prices. It's built on the people who walk through these doors every morning." Heads nodded slowly, and a few employees leaned closer, eager to hear more. She paused, letting her words sink in. Then she continued, "Respect is not optional. It is not something you give only to those with titles or corner offices. It belongs to everyone, from the janitor who keeps this place clean, to the receptionist who greets our clients, to the executive sitting at this table. Without respect, there is no trust. And without trust, there is no success." The man in the gray suit shifted uncomfortably. His fingers fidgeted with the pen that earlier had tapped with arrogance. Beads of sweat formed at his temple, though she still hadn't looked directly at him. Her message wasn't aimed at one man, it was aimed at the entire room. But everyone knew exactly who needed it most. Around the table, people exchanged glances. Some felt guilty for staying silent earlier, while others felt a sense of relief, as though someone had finally said what needed to be said for years. The new CEO wasn't just speaking about leadership, she was showing it. When she finished, the silence was replaced with quiet applause. It wasn't loud, but it was sincere. In that moment, she didn't just lead a meeting, she changed the tone of the company. By the end of the meeting, the atmosphere in the room had completely shifted. The employees who once sat stiff and cautious were now energized, scribbling notes and nodding at the bold strategies their new leader laid out. The vision she shared was fresh, ambitious, and clear, cutting waste, empowering teams, and opening doors for innovation. People could feel a new chapter beginning for the company, and it was exciting. But at the far end of the table, the man in the gray suit sat frozen. His arrogance had melted into nervous silence. He tried to raise his hand once or twice, fumbling for words, but his earlier confidence was nowhere to be found. When he finally managed to speak, his voice cracked slightly. I completely agree with your plans, ma'am. I'd be glad to support in any way possible. His attempt at humility felt forced, but it was clear he was desperate to regain footing. The CEO met his eyes for the first time that morning. Her look was calm, steady, and impossible to read. She didn't humiliate him or bring up what had happened earlier. She didn't need to. Instead, she simply said, "Support is not enough. This company needs results. You'll have the chance to prove whether you can deliver. If not, you'll need to step aside for someone who can." The room was silent again, but this time the silence carried weight and respect. Everyone knew the balance of power had changed. The old culture of arrogance was being replaced with accountability. As the meeting closed, the man lowered his head, realizing his position was no longer untouchable. The woman he had once dismissed had now set the rules, and she wasn't asking. She was leading. Weeks passed, and the change inside the company was undeniable. The hallways that once felt tense and cold now carried a different energy. Employees walked with confidence, knowing their voices mattered. Meetings were no longer dominated by a few loud voices. Instead, ideas flowed from every corner of the room. The culture of fear and arrogance was slowly replaced with collaboration and respect. For the first time in years, people felt proud to be part of the company. The new CEO's leadership style was firm yet fair. She checked in with employees at every level, listening to their concerns, encouraging their creativity, and recognizing their contributions. She proved that leadership wasn't about commanding from the top, it was about lifting people up. Under her direction, the company began to see results. Sales grew, partnerships expanded, and investors gained renewed confidence. Success was no longer just measured in numbers, it was measured in the smiles and dedication of the people who worked there. As for the man in the gray suit, he learned his lesson quickly. He kept his head down, working harder than he ever had before. The arrogance that once defined him had disappeared, replaced by humility. He never forgot the day he made the mistake of underestimating the woman who now ran the company. One Friday afternoon, as the CEO walked through the lobby, employees stopped to greet her with genuine respect. She smiled, knowing that the company she now led was not only stronger in business, but stronger in heart. She had turned an insult into a revolution. The woman once told to serve coffee had proven something far greater. She was capable of serving change, dignity, and vision. And in doing so, she didn't just take over a billion-dollar company, she transformed it forever.